Yeah. Hello. 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 Okay. Uh, Thank you all. Um, Thanks for the talk, Neeraj. I think the takeaway for me is that LLMs are not the problem, people are the problem, right? That's what it came down to. It can do a lot, but it really depends on you to get it out of it. Um, I'm Sreenath. I'm the head of engineering at Travelopia. I've been with Travelopia for the past 7, 8 years. It's been a very fun journey. A large part of what it says here, it's very flattering. It's also kind of true. But I think the biggest recommendation I have for myself is that I've managed to retain a bit of the script kiddie in me, right? I like nothing better than just wiring up platforms together and just marveling at what has happened. Uh, the talk today is about model context protocol. Um, I was asked to give a description 3 weeks ago. I had no talk, I had nothing in mind, but I had to give a description. So I did what any respectable person does now, right? I went to ChatGPT and asked it to give me a description, and that's what you're seeing. If there was any specific, today we are going to deviate from this a little bit, but if there was anything specific about this that you wanted to hear that I don't talk about, then please feel free to approach me after the talk, right? We can talk about it. Uh, yes. So I'll talk about myself again, and I'll try and keep this closer to our current context. There are, like with any of us, I think there are a lot of things that keep me up at night, but there are also a few things that get me out of the bed in the morning. And two of them are pairing with Neeraj or with Isaac. I think we have one-on-ones, which are okay. We talk about office stuff, but it's really when we are on a screen share and we are working on something that's when it gets really exciting. We spoke about a lot of stuff over the years. I think we first ran into LLMs in the early GPT-2 days, wasn't it? There were snippets shared around. We were talking about how fun it is that the computer could talk back to you. Never imagined that I'd see the day when we'll actually see them as part of your tech stacks. So we wondered at the ability. Uh, we sorry, also laughed at the absurdities, right? Here is something that can summarize like a research document and give you high level findings and whatnot, but it couldn't add numbers together. It was very obvious from the very start that there were severe limitations to what LLMs could do and could not do. And probably, it's only fair to them. You should probably be just looking at them for what they're good at. And I went with the flow and settled on a workflow that is comfortable, I think, for all of us, which is the Control C, Control V flow, right? I would copy paste from my documents into ChatGPT, ask it to tell me something, and then copy it back, or put it into my email. Write 2-3 sentences of summary that I couldn't be bothered to ferret out for the general audience, and then ask LLMs. That was where we were for a long time. And this was until I think it was Isaac who showed me how you could add a calculator to an LLM and how the LLM could use the tool and then do a calculation on your behalf, sort of like papering over the gaps there, right? That was a truly mystic moment for me. All my life, computers have been this deterministic machines that would take arguments and give you like a predictable answer, right? Nothing else. But suddenly there were probabilistic outcomes, and then this seemed like a tool that was connecting both of these spaces together between natural language probabilistic output and like a deterministic way to calculate something. Um, And that was also when I think this is maybe almost a year ago now, when Anthropic came out with the computer use demo, where they were demonstrating how Claude could open a browser and do stuff and whatnot. And we went on. I think I was on a call again with Neeraj when we first integrated our first MCP server. Tried it out, and we were like just blown away about how fun it is, yes, but also like what possibilities it unlocks in terms of what you could do with LLMs. And this seems to be what would make LLMs truly useful beyond just talking back to you, right? And then obviously, which tools, right? Yes, you want all of them. And that was bringing up the age-old problem of having, I don't know if you were ever switching between IDEs in the past. You would know that there was a specific language integration for a specific IDE, and then you'd go to a different IDE, and then that would have a different ecosystem that you would have to learn all over again, right? And there was some things nicer about one, some things nicer about the other one. You could never really get like a match. And that was where the IDE folks came out with something called LSP, the Language Server Protocol, so that your IDE could implement a LSP client, and then your language implementers would implement a LSP server. And as long as your IDE was implementing the client, you could talk to any language server out there. And then suddenly, all IDEs had very consistent interactions with language servers, and then you started getting all this intelligent auto assist. And that was more or less the inspiration for MCP. MCP is Model Context Protocol, right? Protocols are the most exciting thing in the world ever. So I'll try and see if I can bore it down a little bit. I'll start with some glossary. We're going to be talking about specific terms, and these terms have specific meanings. So I think if we can draw our mental boxes around these things, it'll make our understanding of the whole process a lot easier. There is going to be an application, which is generally the UI that the user is interacting with. There's an LLM, of course, usually interacted with an API. There is a MCP client, which is, you could think of it as a class that, an instance that the application runs, right? It's very much bundled together with the application. These are not separate things. Your application is doing the UI. It also has a MCP client. And then you're going to have MCP servers, which are like the language servers. You're going to have servers for each of your applications. Your database would have a Postgres MCP server. Your web would have a different one, and so on. And then the server exposes tools, and we're going to be talking about tools and tools calls and messages, right? It's really hard to bring a protocol to life visually beyond saying this is a standard and there's going to be a line break and whatnot, right? So I'm going to hopefully have this here and see if we can talk about this along with an MCP client, which happens to be Claude, that we're doing right now. Yeah. Sorry for all the errors. I'm getting a good glimpse of them. Not a problem. So if you talk about what happens at the startup, I started the application Claude. It can connect to an LLM, and it has an implementation of the MCP client. And all the errors you saw just now was the client trying to connect to the different MCP servers I had configured. But then still not a problem, because some of them it did manage to connect to. There are a few tools available to Claude here. So I'll just try and invoke the one of them, right? Let me start with a generic hello. Can you add 2 and 3 together? The pop-up that you just saw, it's talking about using this tool from a server called Everything. Okay, I'm just going to allow for this chat, and you can see that it's running the add calculation, and then it's giving you the answer. It's the LLM right here going between the probabilistic space and your calculations. Uh, I'll describe the process here as well. When you chat into the application, when I said, can you add 2 and 3 together? What it did was it took my message, yes, but then it also retrieved a list of all the tools that it had access to from the MCP servers that were configured. And then the message to the LLM was not just your message, but also a list of all the tools that were available to the application. Now, the LLM in this case was smart enough to say, hey, adding is something I'm not very good at, and there are tools that can help me, so I'm going to use a tool. And it responds back to the application with a specific message that right here where it says tool use, right? The application then realizes that it's a call for a tool use, and then it calls the appropriate tool, and then sends the result of the tool back to the LLM. One oddity, I think I understand why this is the case, but it still feels odd after a lifetime spent in HTTP. The client maintains a stateful one-on-one connection with every single server that's out there, or the ones that are configured to it. The MCP server itself, it exposes a few things to the client. There's a Fireship video out, I think 3-4 days ago, where I think they put it much better than I could have. The way Fireship described all these different objects that the server was exposing is to say that the resources are more like GET requests, where you're not causing any side effects, but you can't do any computations either, apparently. A typical use case for this would be where if you're using Puppeteer to test one of your websites, and if you want like a view of the logs that are coming into the console, logs are not something you're going to write to. These are a resource that is being produced as a byproduct of your running application. So you could choose to give your logs as a resource to browser console logs. Because I have Puppeteer here, you see it as a resource. And I could choose to attach the resource to a chat to help give my LLM more context on what it can do. Similarly, I've seen folks talk about giving access to a database view so that your LLM has some context on the data it's working on top of, and it can take decisions on top of this. The very, very good thing about the client and server connection being a long-lived one is that you can do auto updates. You have, let's say, a database view once again, which is changing to reflect, transactions that are coming into your system. Then your LLM is guaranteed to always have the newest data out of it. Okay, tools get the most exposure, I think, justifiably probably, because tools are the ones that are causing real action to happen in the outside world. And once again, Fireship wants to call it a post request, where you're creating a new resource somewhere, right? That is the general mental model, I think, to think about it. And then there are prompts. Prompts are examples on how you could use the various tools or resources. So I have one MCP here, which is called fetch, and a prompt that the fetch MCP would expose to the MCP client could be fetch this URL. Just textual string, just says fetch this URL is a prompt. And then what is happening internally is whenever I send a message to say, hey, fetch enchantingtravels.com for me, it knows to use the fetch tool because I use the word that it's sort of reserving a prompt for. Another way prompts can be useful is to do multi-step actions. So you could choose to say, you could choose to templatize something and say there's a prompt that would take a name, greet them, and then follow on with a question to say how you're doing or whatnot. And then the last one, I think this is, MCP is very much a living spec. They came out with the first version maybe 4 or 5 months ago now, I think. But given that there is adoption, given that there is more widespread usage, the protocol itself is being worked on. And I think samplings are something that were added recently, because if you go back to what was said here, it is really the application that has an access to the LLM API, but your server itself is running in a different location, right? So samplings are a way for your MCP servers to tell the application, hey, I'd like the help of an LLM to do what I need to do, right? Then the application can relay on that message to the LLM and get back to the tool saying, okay, this is your completion, and now go use it to finish your task. The thing about all the different objects that the MCP server exposes to an LLM is that they are extremely, extremely simple. The 4 parameters you're seeing here are likely all you need. And what I have below here is actual code from the Puppeteer MCP server. This is not pseudocode, this is not like hypothetical, this is exactly what's running here. And the first section, it's defining a tool with a name, a description, and an input schema. Input schema is talking about all the arguments that that function could take, right? If that function is going to take a URL, it's going to be type of string, and then it's going to be required. And in a lot of ways, this is like a one-to-one mapping of what is eventually going to happen. A tool call, a function call, right? Whatever arguments it's going to take, that's essentially what you're saying here. And the handling of the tool call will be familiar to most React devs, I think. It's a giant switch. You get a tool call, you look at the name says Puppeteer navigate, you go and call a page.goto in your Puppeteer library, right? That is all that is going on to translate between what the LLM is saying and what you're going to be executing in actual code. I would like to quickly demonstrate what that does. I have a, can you tell me if the, I think it's called start planning button on, I could send it a prompt like this, right? Where I'm talking about something, something that's a visual element of a page that is out there on the web, right? And it figured out it could use Puppeteer to sort of go there and start looking into what's happening. There's going to be a few more. And everything that you see here is something you're familiar with. Puppeteer screenshot, you've worked with it before. It's not something new, right? It's only the translation that feels a little bit different here. And now it wants to do a click, which is again familiar. And it failed. This is interesting, I think. It failed to click the primary button. And I think this is, one of the best parts of using MCP and like agentic systems, right? Let them make the mistakes. It's how we do things as well. We try something, it fails, we see an error, we go back, iterate, try to do it differently, try something else. So let me just, so what did it fail? It tried to use a selector called button.primary button. Didn't work. It wants to write an entire script. I mean, live demos are iffy as it is, but once you start dealing with LLMs, okay, should we? Oh, okay. Ooh, it actually did it. That is the form that your start navigating thing takes you to. This is all fun while you're just playing with it, right? But then if you're like in an actual application where these clicks could cost you something in terms of updates or whatnot, maybe you'll want to be more careful. I'll just go back to my presentation. That was a very, very condensed synopsis of what MCP was. At this point, I'd like to pause Are there any questions or anything you'd like to ask? Yes, please.
So how did it know that it has to use Puppeteer? Because you just gave it a URL. Is it something built in into cloud that it knows which tool to invoke when?
That is the part I referred to as mystic earlier, right? How did it know to use the add tool to add two
Yeah,
numbers?
exactly. Yeah. How did it know that?
Yeah.
It's
That
part of cloud then.
so this helps your description where
Okay,
you're
so it
telling.
uses that. Okay.
Yeah, so you're giving hints, you're giving descriptions, and you're giving text guidance on top of it. But then, how does it translate that text into a reasoning step and then decide to use this?
Okay.
Is
Fair enough.
yeah.
So in a normal agentic system, we have a list of tools.
Yes.
So we have a LLM also and list
Yes.
of tools.
Yes.
And we have a React prompt,
Yes.
reasoning and action.
Yes.
So we can provide the tool. It can decide which tool to use, and it can navigate through that
Right.
and bring the result. So now when I'm into MCP, the client is working as like that. But when it is come to the server, a tool can be like a Postgres, let's say, database. In LangChain, we have Postgres database agent and tools.
Yes.
Data has a tool.
Yes.
Now, but when I'm building an MCP server of a Postgres,
Yes.
how it is different from that?
It's exactly the same. It's just one. You know how you're used to defining your functions and tools for open AI API, right? This just happens to be Anthropic's version of that on how to give a list of tools to the LLM. They happen to make it open source, and it happens to be flexible enough that there's a lot of adoption. But at the end of the day, the entire process that's happening is exactly what would happen with OpenAI or any other framework in terms of tools. When you're ultimately making that LLM call, right? You have a parameter, tools equal to tools, same, no difference. Same.
So when I'm writing an MCP server for a Postgres database, let's say, so anyway, I need a client to connect to the DB. So in Python, we have Python client, PG.
Yes.
So we can do the connection, and here for MCP, we have to provide only the credential in the Anthropic way. So we'll provide the credential and
Okay.
it can do the connection, right?
Yes. Yes. Good question. I'll see if I can answer this well. You are going to have your MCP Postgres server that is going to expose tools, correct? It is going to include your Postgres library to talk to Postgres. You could choose to include your API credentials, password, username, whatnot within that itself. Okay. It is going to expose a tool, let's say called execute query. Okay, and then once a user asks a question on your MCP client compatible app, it's going to decide that it can use the execute query to get more data. So you could let's say potentially give it a database of your company's users, and then if your question had to say, hey, who is my most active user? It would know that this would be something that it would get out of the database because of all the hints that you're giving it. And then it also has enough knowledge to construct the query to pull that data out of it. And the usual pattern that I observed, once again, it's not deterministic, it changes all the time. But a common pattern I saw Claude doing was first it describes the whole database, gets like a dump of every single table, every single column, and what the relations are. And then it selects the top 5, 10 rows of the table that it's interested in, looks at the data. And the next query is usually what you want, where it's doing your aggregate, some queries, whatnot, and trying to apply the logic of how to translate most active user into a database query. What tables do I need to look at, and how should that relations be? It usually happens 3-4 steps down the line.
But these steps we won't be specifying in the server. LLM will be deciding to frame the query and all,
Yes.
right? And like how better it will be when we have a complex table structure, join operation and all. Will it be that reliable in that case?
It helps if your database is well defined, your foreign keys and relations are all well defined. It helps. Sometimes it helps for you to manually go down that step one by one. You could start by describe the database for me. so that it dumps the structure, brings it into the context of your chat,
Okay.
and then ask the question of, hey, which tables might contain information about my users? So it might say the users table has, login information, whatnot, and then there is a user statistics table which records all the actions they're doing, right? It might help to guide it step by step, but recently they've been working more often than not, to be honest.
Nice. Thank you.
Not at all.
So, okay, what happens when you use reasoning? Like if you turn on extended thinking, like does it change the way the interactions happen? Like is it smarter in the interactions or whatever, or just slower?
I start a chat with the same thing again, it does something different. So I think it changes. Thinking also changes things. And for me, it comes down to the scope of the problem. If you have a big problem, thinking tends to help. Not a huge problem, but if you wanted to reason across 2-3 data points, right? Thinking seems to help. But if there is just one thing that you wanted to do, thinking tends to make it overcomplicated. It tends to do too many things. All of this is empirical, based on observation, not hard science. So take it for what it's worth.
Because I was wondering, like, if there's like a whole bunch of tools and you turn on thinking, like it's smarter in like deciding which tool to use or whatever.
No, at least I have not observed it. The smartness about how the model selects the tools varies between tools. It seems to vary between applications as well. Claude can actually select tools very well. Cursor I found struggling, and there are other tools, Goose or OpenWeb UI. You could. I would suggest just play with it. Recently, I think a fun thing is that Gemma 3-4 billion open source model that came out. If you're running Olama locally, that seems to be really good, and you can sort of do it all on your computer without worrying about data privacy and such.
Any other questions?
Do you want to talk about the MCP Compass?
MCP Compass.
Yeah, it's something we were discussing, right? It is going to be helping discoverability even better.
Okay. I can.
Somebody else had a question.
MCP Compass happens to be one of many directories out there. You could, there is, I don't know, glama.ai, I think, smithery.ai. There are many MCP directories that are out there. Some of them are more trustworthy than others, in the sense that you have to be aware. See, setting up an MCP server is hard, right? Because you are running a server on your local machine, right? You have the client, which is the UI, and then you're running a bunch of 4-5 different servers on your local machine, communicating with the client, and then you have the remote Llama API endpoint. So there are various efforts underway where folks are experimenting with remote hosted servers. Maybe you buy a license, you just connect to a server that's external to you. But then how do you have that connect to your database? How do you authorize all of that? And like you asked, right, where do you put the credentials? Is it in the client? Is it something you supply to it in a session, or is it something that you embed into the server? I think the authorization story around MCP is still evolving. There is no specific answer yet. I know that Cloudflare has something. Cloudflare has they have an authorization server for MCP. I've not tried it out, but because
if
it
you
was a
think
puzzle
like
for me, I put it
for
here.
a Google or any other resource server, right? Can OAuth2 can be leveraged.
Google.
I mean, like any of that, like mail or like let's say Slack or
Yeah.
if something
So
is already supporting the OAuth2 and like when you prompting and
yeah, Cloudflare. I think Cloudflare. If you could try out the server, I think that's what it does. It uses the OAuth2 tokens to authenticate you for different services.
right. And I had one more question regarding like the consistency of and the reliability of the data. For example, if 2-3 for the same sort of data, right? So
Uh-huh.
there are 3 implementations, and probably you are connecting to those 3 tools, and then how does it decide on the priority and then like the relevancy of the data,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because does it take the precedence over the other data, and then like just because of it gets
Trial and
implemented
error
in MCP,
and different for every chat.
right? And
Yeah.
definitely there's no consistency, because if you think this is more to take an action, like this is also an action taken oriented, right? Like you now, so far what we were doing is like we were actually giving input and taking some sort of output, and now
Yes.
you can leverage these things and then take actions also. Like
Yes.
you can put up a workflow and then
Yes.
do certain things. Now for that, like how do you achieve the consistency? If the workflow, if you're doing it, the consistency became sort of important based on what you are trying to do.
Okay.
So
Consistency is a problem. I have ideas. All of us would, right? All of us are engineers, and once we run into a problem, I have ideas on how you could do it. You could potentially start by sort of free form exploring the space that you have, figure out what's working. Like what I said earlier, you do the describe step of a database and then do the listing of 5 topmost assets, topmost rows, and then do your queries. If you could come up with a workflow like that, you could potentially templatize it.
but does it confine to those 5 boundaries? I mean, you put up a boundary now, like to just 5 tools, or does it also look at the trained data,
Training data.
the data which is trained already with LLMs?
I'm not sure I follow.
Yeah, I mean, like probably thinking in the direction where like my those 5 MCP servers, like let's say I'm consuming some data
Yes.
for it, and then I also have a trained data
Yes.
along with it. So it's like how they work together is what I was trying to see.
I don't think the LLM is deriving any tools out of the training data natively.
Okay.
So when you have an LLM, it has no tools at all. It's
Yeah.
I think Karpati was mentioned earlier. He refers to it as a zip file that you can ask questions on, right? That's all it is. No connection to anywhere. And it's through this interaction of prompting the LLM and giving it extra information in terms of tools, and then having the description out there, right, about what the tool is going to do. I think that is what enables it to make the connection.
Sure. Yeah.
And you probably don't want to have 2 tools that can execute schema on a database at once.
Right.
Will probably confuse it, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one more question.
Take the mic.
So how much does the description of the tool itself matter? Like if the description, like
Yeah.
can you influence the tool to influence the LLM to use a tool through the description? Like if you don't use this tool, you are in deep trouble.
Not deep trouble, but you could probably tell it to use the Puppeteer navigate tool, and it'll probably listen. Yes.
No, I'm asking like in a sort of like malicious perspective, like through
Okay.
the description itself, can you force the LLM to use the tool? is my
Yeah,
question.
yeah. I think, like I said, MCP is new. I know that while I was researching for this, I saw something about tool poisoning attacks for MCP. I think probably being discovered still. Because so there are Reddit talks about everything under the sun, and there are folk who were trying to have a tool that would reformat a malicious ask in a on the surface, benign manner, so that the LLM can actually respond to what you asked. So instead of asking, "Hey, build me a bioweapon," you could tell that to one of your maybe a uncensored small local model that would generate the prompt that you could feed into like a very big model that can actually answer that question. There are, I think crazy things are being tried out there.
So when we testing MCP, only Claude is the option.
No, there are other tools as well.
Why I'm asking, because with Claude, it is not possible to use Olama, right?
With Claude, you can't.
So I
can't.
want those tool where I can, those
Yes.
IDE where I can
Yes.
use all.
I have one suggestion for that.
Yeah.
This is called Web UI.
Web.
You could very much use your local model and get it to use tools. But I think clients are not in a very good state at the moment. All of them are annoying. Probably not a problem with the client. Probably the fact that you have to run these external servers on your machine, right? Some of them are built with npm, some of them built with Python, whatever, right? And then you have to sort of figure out how to run them on your local machine. I think that is the annoying part.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nobody? Okay. Okay. All right. So the reason I wanted to take a pause here was so that we could appreciate just this part, how simple it is to really create a tool for an LLM. You need a name, description, and textual description of what the parameters are going to be, which means there are way too many servers out there. There's like over, and this is from one of the sources, right? Like Venki mentioned, one of the MCP directories is listing 3000. There are more listed elsewhere. There are more being built on GitHub that never get displayed. There are lots of servers being built that don't go beyond the README. They get listed. So it's a very chaotic world out there. But I think Anthropic have promised to come out with a registry, a set of tested MCP servers that are at least decently implemented. So we are all probably going to have to wait for that. There are incredibly wild servers out there. There are enterprise MCP servers that can connect to your Jira, read a ticket, connect to Slack, find the context around that ticket, and connect to your GitHub, raise a PR. There are MCP servers that can connect to your BigQuery, sort of start analyzing the data there. You can connect to your CRM systems. If you ever had an API for a third-party system or for doing something, there is probably an MCP server out there for it. And if not, it is ridiculously easy for you to build one yourself. Right? All it takes is something along the lines of this snippet here. Describe it and then call the function that you're interested in. And a lot of MCP. So I think a lot of MCP servers also do this right now. They do like a one-on-one mapping of what exists already to a MCP tool. So if you had like a library that was doing CRUD over a resource, you'd probably get a MCP that is doing CRUD as well. Now, it is not very clear whether CRUD is the most efficient paradigm for working in LLMs. Maybe you want something higher level. Maybe you want APIs for workflows rather than resource level granularity, but that is yet to be seen, I think. This is where we are starting, and as it evolves, I think it'll be fun to watch where it goes. This one I think is worth playing. This is some guy. I don't have YouTube Premium, I'm sorry. This is one guy who has his instance of Blender connected to Claude. Blender is this modeling software, right, for creating 3D art. A lot of game development studios use this. And that is Claude building the scene on Blender. Right? It's a it's not a long video, but that is not bad, no? For a dragon guarding a hoard of gold. There are other wild, crazy demos out there. You can look. I think even the Fireship video call said I gave Claude access to my root or something. I think, yeah. I think one thing we all learned about the internet is that if it can be done, somebody somewhere probably will, right? And it leads for some hilarious things. There is a MCP for a 3D printer, which I'm like really eager to try. Combining Blender and a 3D printer seems right up my alley, right? That's probably going to be my next project. There are robotic MCPs that control the output of Arduino pins, whatnot. Uh, I don't understand Arduino very well, but to my layman's view, it seems like a very small step between a Arduino and a moving robot that you could probably control with a LLM. There are agentic MCPs. There is a MCP for deep research, right? So if you are if the pricing of OpenAI or something is too steep for you, you can probably have a homegrown deep research MCP running locally on your machine just by using this. Sequential thinking is another agentic one that I like. Given a sufficiently complex question, the LLM seems to figure out how many steps it should take to reason in a step-by-step manner before coming to a conclusion. This one scares me. I mean, there's a MCP for WhatsApp as well. Yes. And I'm very, very, very proud to say Travelopia has two that we have in our GitHub repository at the moment that we are using. And the finding has been that they compose very, very, very well, which means you could be asking a question of your database, the same question, let's say, the most active user that you have, and then maybe have your CRM take an action for that user, trigger a workflow on HubSpot for that particular user saying, hey, you've been very active. We'd like to chat, tell us what we're doing right or wrong, just for feedback or whatever. So you can do all that in a single chat. They compose well. You can have queries that span multiple systems. That seems to work. A single prompt that spans multiple systems seems to work. Or you could always, go step by step, do a single system at a time, and then sort of pass on that information. There are puzzles with MCP, the authorization being one of them. In your typical app layer, you have your authentication and then you have authorization. Who is allowed to do what across what resources? But with MCP and LLMs, that is a little less clear. OAuth seems to be the right solution. I think Google were talking about SSO and that propagating across all of your services as well as a way to sort of limit access. Yeah, and the connection being stateful, I understand how useful it could be to send updates back to the LLM, but coming from a HTTP world, I find it a little bit weird. Okay, so far you've seen that tools are basically wrapping all the abilities you already have, giving them to an LLM, letting it reason and use them. And the process for doing it is super easy. So there's like an explosion of tools out there. What I don't like very much is the state of the applications. Claude Desktop, when I opened Claude earlier, you saw all the errors they were, right? That's because Claude was not loading my environment, the one that I use in my ZSH. So it was having trouble finding some resources that I can use perfectly normally on my terminal, but not in Claude. I'm sure there is a workaround for that. I've just not done it yet, but that's a default problem. Cursor wants to limit everything. It wants to limit context. It wants to limit the number of files it does. It wants to limit the number of MCP tools it can use. The limit for the LLM itself seems like, I think 150, 200 tools were suggested. Beyond that, the LLM seems to get confused. But Cursor limits you to 40, which I think is not great. There are open source tools. There is Goose that I've just installed. I've not tried it yet. I don't have it open. I've tried it. Didn't have a very good initial first 5-10 minute experience. Web UI, I was interested in because we are talking about, we've been talking about a desktop application that runs on your machine. We have been talking about servers that run on your machine as well. But once you get into the realms of, hey, what do you do for your company in your product, this is not an easy thing to push through. You don't want your clients, users implementing things, and then you have to play the role of tech support, right? The web has been a good solution for us. You give them a UI, whatever happens on the server, I have access to that. A client has a problem, I can go fix it for them, and everything is in my control. But with Claude and others, it doesn't seem to be that case. So web UI, I was very optimistic. I have yeah, I have a server attached to this. I can probably ask it to, yeah, I already did. I have a prompt that says, can you add 2 and 3 together? It used the add tool. But the funny part is where it appends the word post to the end of it, right? So WebUI insists to wrap MCP on a layer of OpenAPI, right? Everything you have on an MCP server, it runs a bridge to convert that to OpenAPI. I probably have something docs 9001/docs. No, okay. Yeah, so like I said, the state of tools I'm not very happy about. Claude Desktop has that problem, cursor limits. Goose, maybe I should give it another chance. WebUI wants to convert it to an OpenAPI endpoint. And the one environment that I really like is to use Klein or RuCode within VS Code. These are extensions. They are similar to Cursor in that they're agentic, and then they'll let you do multi-step implementations at once. And they don't come with a subscription, right? You're not paying them a fixed sum to use it. These are free extensions, but you're supposed to bring your own API keys. So your LLM expenses are your own, which lets them use the LLMs to their best potential, I feel. They are always eager to read more context. If there's a package.json, you don't need to add it. It'll probably read it by default. It'll gather as much context as it can. And it's going to be liberal about tool calls as well. So Klein I like, RuCode I like. All the others work as well, but to varying degrees. So that is it for where we are. I couldn't stop myself from speculating a little bit as well. The first thing to talk about is probably the scaffolding around AI agents that we're building. We are all familiar with this first one, right? You can go to ChatGPT today, create a new custom GPT and give it a system prompt to say, hey, you're a database expert. Given a query, you write excellent syntactically correct queries, whatnot. That was the first stage of how we used independent, smaller LLMs within like a larger application ecosystem. The next step was to say, hey, you have access to tools. Now go use these tools and then give me a result. But then access to tools does a curious thing. It gives the agent more abilities so that your prompt probably wants to start taking advantage of that as well, right? You could give it like a memory tool where after every interaction, it could summarize what happened, what worked, what didn't, write it to a file on your file system somewhere. And then you can have it read this file at the start of every invocation so that it has some context on what went earlier. It's not starting afresh, right? And the tools themselves seem to unlock abilities. Yeah, I'm really excited to see where this takes us. What it means for the applications, I think, is see, even if all the trouble with the applications goes away, even if they become easier to install and use, there are 3,000 servers out there, each of them with their own set of tools, right? If you're counting the tools, I think the count is a lot higher. You are not going to be able to give all these tools to a single LLM and expect it to span across all of them intelligently while taking these decisions. And it doesn't help that a lot of these descriptions are navigate to an URL, right? It doesn't really, people could be writing better descriptions, but they usually probably don't. So there is a very good chance that your LLM is going to get confused. So your next Claude desktop equivalents are probably going to have agents, and each of them is going to have a list of tools. So you're probably going to have a database expert agent, a role or persona, and that's the one that's going to have access to your Postgres, whereas your analytics agent is going to create HTML files or visualizations, I guess. Right? I do very much think that not all of our Claudes are going to be the same. Depending on our role, what we do, what we like, I think each of our application is going to be slightly different. Maybe someone's working more with databases, someone's working more with gaming, so I really think our applications are going to become more and more DIY, where we are able to fiddle with them and then give it new abilities or use them very flexibly. And I do think that has some implications for how we are going to be building products and then for the nature of HCI as well, how we're going to be interacting with computers. I just have a sense that it has an implication there. I don't have a prediction for what's going to happen. Just some random news. OpenAI has officially implemented Model Context Protocol in their Agents SDK. This is Google Sundar Pichai's tweet about considering MCP for the Gemini models as well, right? So there's quite a bit of momentum. MCP or not, I think tools are here, and one way or another, I think your LLMs are going to get a lot more. Are going to get a lot.
At the right time.
It was.
Already it got so much momentum.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's very unavoidable for Google to
Yes.
go with an alternative.
Yeah.
They have to.
There's, I think, an explosion of MCP
and it is
news over the
already
last.
behind OpenAI anyway, right?
Yes.
So I'm sure it's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. They might decide it's in their best interest to sort of adopt it. I really hope
They had a change in the leadership of Gemini after the torch.
they did. Yes.
I don't
Yeah.
know, the new leader
Yeah.
proposed new things.
What I really wish for is that they form like an open committee and work on it the way they work on web standards, right? Do this work out in the open. Okay. Just some random notes. I think USB-C is the commonly used analogy for MCP. I stayed away from that because now we have to do two things to understand one thing, right? I think where the analogy is useful for me, beyond it being like a universal connector for all the tools, is that it's a two-way connection. If you remember, it's a stateful connection that the client is establishing to the server, and the server can always push updates back to the client, updating a resource and whatnot. I think that could be useful to keep in mind, right? It just means it's that much more primed and ready for what's coming. How can you use all this? Claude Desktop is probably your best bet, unless all of you are comfortable with IDEs and you can install Cursor or Klein or any of them. Some watching material, Fireship, I think their video is an automatic recommendation, right? They have one on MCP that does a good job. There is one part about what they said that confused me. I think I called it out earlier as well. They say a resource is like a GET request, but then no side effects and no computation. No side effects I understand if you're getting data, but no computation I don't.
Maybe it's just, like, it's a pass-through, right?
Yeah,
Right?
maybe you're
So-
supposed to
so
represent it.
logs are just a pass-through.
Yes.
I mean, it's still, it's like from one port to another port.
Yeah,
It's very minimal, right? So
yeah,
especially if you don't encrypt, etc. Right? So
Yeah.
a lot of these things happen in Kafka, etc.
yes, yes, yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, I
Flagship.
I mean, see, I think here's my gap. These are not enforceable, right? You really can't enforce that a resource is not doing any.
These are just
Guidelines
some
of-
nomenclature and
Yes.
classification for easy understanding of
Yes.
the kind of things by flagship.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a wild west. Right? So, I mean, right now, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's like it has gone
Yeah.
beyond.
Yes,
adoption,
they've
right?
really
Ghibli,
gone
right?
crazy.
Ghibli,
They've really
right?
gone crazy. Ghibli,
may
yeah.
just, same way. It
Yes.
has happened for last. I mean, when it was introduced, there was a moment of lull for 2-3 months.
Yeah.
Then it just took off.
Yeah.
So last
Yeah.
2 months.
And I think a part of it is also because of what Grok did, in that they were not denying any.
Oh yeah.
I think that had a lot to do with it as well. If they were like sanitized generations, I don't know if it would have caused as much furor as it has. And the last, dealing with social media. I'm subscribed to all these channels, and then there's news coming out every day. It's exhausting. But preparing for this talk has been a very good way for me to sort of deal with all of that, condense it into something that I could hold in my mind. So thank you all for the chance. Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. You got a question? Any questions, anyone?
Hi, thanks for the nice talk. Do you have any examples where we would not want to use MCP and would rather use, or we are better off using normal tool calls and writing the entire logic ourselves? Because at least for me, this is an abstraction over the regular tool calls we've
Yeah.
been doing, right? Do you have any cases where we might
So
not want to use this?
I really think, Rupak, that there are two phases, even when you're developing a product, right? In the initial phase where you're discovering what can be done, and afterwards, you know that this workflow is useful for me. So I think your MCP is probably going to help you explore, but once you have a pattern nailed down, you probably want to implement it in like traditional classical logic so that you have guarantees that it's going to produce the same thing every time.
Got it. And maybe so case where I see MCP useful is where you want a truly pluggable system, where you want the, like in Claude UI you can choose whatever MCP servers you want
Yeah.
and then use them. So if you're building an end user application where you probably want the end users to select whatever uh, like tools they want
Which of the tools
to
they are
run, this is where this might be useful. But imagine an end user application where they don't care or they don't even know what the underlying
Yes.
technology is,
Yes.
and you want better control.
Yes.
You're better off maybe not using MCP.
Yeah.
Yeah, mature. If you already know what to do, yeah, that you are mature enough. So that's it. During POC, MCP will help us. Maybe once you
Yeah.
mature.
Okay.
Right.
And also one thing I'd like to call out in what you said, you spoke about regular tools and MCP. I don't think there's a difference. MCP is tools for LLMs. They're the same thing.
So what the way I understood it is, imagine me implementing this without using MCP. So I have a bunch of tools defined. I will pass them in the LLM call. It classifies that you need to call this tool with
Yeah.
these arguments.
Yeah.
I will handle that with a, maybe you showed a switch case, right? Where
Yes.
you select
Yeah. Yeah.
your function to be called with the parameters.
Right.
You handle the errors yourself.
Yes.
And pass them on to the LLM call so that it can take the next steps.
Yes.
Right. So all these steps, some of these are abstracted with MCP, right? In the sense that if I'm a client developer, I don't need to worry about what's happening within the tool, how the tool
don't-
is executing.
I can.
Right?
This is probably simpler than. Where is this? There is. You can look at clients. I think. No, there is something for. There is something for client developers. Hey, sorry. For client developers, all that is happening, you'll see is, let's see. See, it connects to a server, gets a list of tools. This is what it's interested in. These tools are an array of tools that can be called that are being given by a certain server, and they're being represented in pretty much the same way. JSON format is how it's being sent to the LLM, and when you give it to the LLM, you use your regular tools equal to this array, this sort of JSON array, right? There is nothing different that's happening in MCP. It's the same as any other tool call from any other provider. maybe a slight difference in formats. Does
Got
that
it.
make sense?
Got
I
it.
don't know if it addressed exactly what you were wondering.
My point was specifically around probably cases where I don't want that client server separation uh, is where I might not want to use MCP
Okay.
in short, right? Because there are some cases where your client is handling things which probably in an application
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might want everything to be handled
Okay.
in the backend.
Okay. I think I finally got it. Yeah, probably not in that case.
Yeah.
Probably
So
not.
yeah, got it. Second thing is I have tools which are named very similarly or descriptions which are very close to one another that might cause
Yes.
some hit in the accuracy
It does.
in terms
It
of
does.
selecting it right.
It does.
Is there a way to improve it?
Is there a way to prove it?
To improve the
I don't know if you were doing a server and you were exposing tools or prompts. I think maybe if you could namespace them and be verbose about your descriptions, I think that will help.
can you highlight what you mean by namespacing?
Uh, I don't know if I use the right word. Namespacing in your programming is very specific, right?
Got
This
it.
is the term, this is the term.
You mean-
but in LLMs,
okay.
it seems to be a colon, a heading, a markdown, something.
Got it. So basically making sure that but okay, when we are using a specific client
Huh.
like Claude UI, there it might not be possible, but when we're probably, let's say we're building a custom client, we
Yes.
can optimize this by adding another layer which can depending on the query
Judge the
group,
tool.
or like you said,
Yeah.
select a particular namespace of tools and then pass on only those tools to the LLM.
I think Landgraph had a video where they were talking about how to handle a large number of tools. What they were recommending was to take all the descriptions, put them in a vector database, and do RAG over it for every user query before you call the LLM.
I believe this also has an issue because you can still get, let's say, 3 tools which are
Yes.
very closely
Possible. Yes.
related,
Yes.
right? For us, practically, what has worked in this case is fine tuning an LLM or a small model which does this classification for you.
Yeah.
So given a query, it'll first pass through the smaller LLM. It'll tell you if you need to make a tool call or not.
Select this one or the
So
other
you
one. Okay.
decoupled your tool call from
Okay.
the larger LLM.
That sounds very interesting. I'll grab you after this. Yeah. Very cool.
There is one meta level question. You don't have to answer it maybe, but this is something I keep on asking people. So I believe that 3 levers on which LLM applications are operating are um, latency, accuracy, and cost. And when I say LLM application, I mean the agentic
Yeah,
applications,
at
like
that higher
ones
level.
which we can, we are building with multiple LLM calls. The problem with this is that it's hard to balance off these 3 levers together in most of the real world scenarios. Take cursor, for example. I end up using.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Cool. Right. Thank you. Thank you.
A big shout out and thanks to the Travelopia tech team. Sreenath and Neeraj, thanks for coming over and sharing your experience.